Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our Director of Basketball Recruiting and analyst, longtime college, AAU, and high school coach. He is David Sisk, and we are here to continue our preview series, looking ahead to North Carolina's upcoming basketball season. The top-ranked Tar Heels, number one in the AP poll, number one pretty much in every poll. And we are discussing each of the 5 starters. We'll also do a podcast about the returning reserves, about the freshman class. And several days before the opener, we will have a pretty cool roundtable, David, myself, and our very own Jacob Turner. So, David, we are here to discuss Armando Bacot. He is a cover boy. He is the preseason ACC Player of the Year, first-team All-America, NIL King, Mr. Personality, and by sometime in January, he will probably be the all-time leading rebounder at North Carolina, which is a rather impressive thing to have, given the great rebounders that have played in that school over time. So what are your thoughts as we go into the season about senior forward Armando Bacot?
Well, to me, there's probably 2 guys in college basketball who, to me, are ahead of everybody else when it comes to National Player of the Year. And that's going to be Armando Bacot and Oscar Tshiebwe. And to me, you know, especially taking other bigs, you know, they're heads above everybody else. So, you know, I think that's one thing about North Carolina. If you're a fan, it's probably the same thing Kentucky fans are asking them or saying to themselves is this needs to be the year we make this run and get this, because Armando Bacot's just don't walk through the door every 6 months. You know, like you're talking about. We're talking about, you know, an all-time great North Carolina player, all-time leading rebounder with the guys that have come through there. I mean, kidding. And so, you know, I go back to a place that's had just so many great post players, and you know he can compete with any of them. So, you know, I guess my thing would be is what do you say about Armando Bacot? I would say to the other 4 players, get him the ball more. And you know, I go back. I can think of some games specifically. You go back to the loss at Notre Dame, and I made a big point about this. When they lost to Notre Dame in South Bend, and you go back the last 4 minutes of that game, and he never gets the ball, never gets a shot in the last 4 minutes of a possession game, you know, where Notre Dame was not big inside. They were small. They were a finesse team. And you got the feeling if Bacot gets the ball 2 feet in the paint, he can score every time he touches it. So get him, you know, 16 points, 0.3 points, 13.1 rebounds. I just like to see him get more touch, especially in crucial games, in tight games. I just feel like late, you've got to get it to him. So just keep doing what you're doing. You know, obviously and we'll talk about this, about his game venturing out, improving. But as far as going to the NBA, trying to get ready for that. But I think my big thing right now is get him the ball.
Yeah, I think sometimes one of their best offensive plays is a missed shot that bounces around the rim because he's going to get it. And he's going to put it back up and either draw a foul or score. Let me read a couple of stats here. 31 double-doubles last year, tied David Robinson when he was a sensational player at Navy back in the mid-'80s. He had 31 double-doubles. NCAA record. Armando, only player in NCAA history to have 6 double-doubles in the NCAA tournament. Each game had a double-double. He had 22 rebounds in the Elite Eight against St. Peter's. He went 21 and 22, I think, that game. And he had 21 rebounds, or 22 rebounds it was, against Duke in the Final Four. And that was when he was already banged up with the ankle. 511 rebounds last season, which is 95 more than anybody ever had in a season before. And I remember covering Bryce Johnson's run in 2016. And I remember after each game, Steve Kersher would give us the numbers about how much closer Bryce was closing in on the all-time rebounding record a single season, and he just kind of rolled by it. Armando slaughtered that number, and Bryce was sensational that year. He is 10th all-time right now with 1,001 rebounds. He's 218 away from Tyler Hansborough's all-time record. And here's what really fascinates me, because Armando really does get a lot of his press about being a rebounder. He scored 635 points last season, David. If he scores 635 points again this season, he's going to finish with 1,946 points, which is 9th all-time at North Carolina. So if he wins a national title, and he wins a player of the year, and he finishes as the all-time leading rebounder in Carolina history, and he's the 9th all-time leading scorer, Armando Bacot's going to go down in history in a way that a lot of people didn't think it would happen. They never even considered it a couple of years ago. But he is on course to end up being that kind of legendary player, going down in Carolina lore. I think things are setting up for that to actually take place this year.
Yeah, and then you get into Tyler Hansbrough territory. Which he may not be that far off. I guess right now, players that I compare him to, you think a lot about Brad Daugherty and guys like that who had was a great player at North Carolina. Sometimes he's forgotten, but it was a great player.
He was a number one pick.
Yes. And you kind of think about that. And you think about what the national championship would do to enhance. But if he does all that, like you're talking about, just a few more points, he's a 2,000-point scorer. So let's say he finishes top number 1 in rebounds, top 10 in scoring, national championship winner. You would hear at the broadcast next year when Dick Vitale is there, you would hear him say, "We're here at the Dean Smith Center, and the players are leaving Roy Williams Court and going to the Armando Bacot locker room." So he's going to have that kind of cachet, and man, I mean, you talk about a high rent district he's in, just to be mentioned in North Carolina basketball. But then when you get up to that, man, like I said, that there's not many can say that.
I would hope they would name the post-game interview room after Armando, because he is one of the best interviews ever. And he's going to be on fire this year because he's really going to be feeling his oats. And by the way, if all that happens, he might be the last guy to ever wear number 5 at North Carolina. And there's been some pretty good ones.
Well, I guess that's the next place to go. That's what you always think about. You look up and see the Raptors. I think that happens anyway. I would be shocked. I don't care if he has a subpar year from what we expect or whatever. I would still think that.
Two of Roy's title teams in Carolina had a starter that wore number 5. So why not? So Armando's game, other than the dominant rebounding on both ends of the floor, I think he's a much better defensive player than he gets credit for. You talked a lot last year, and in fact, one of your scouting videos, you did a whole thing on his ability to set ball screens and high screens. And now they got 2 guys that can set great high ball screens. So we might see some pretty interesting double screens and things they're going to use Pete Nance and Armando with. How do you see Armando playing alongside Pete Nance this year?
The biggest key to me last year when they won at Cameron Indoor was Armando Bacot's ball screens. Yeah. They still have not figured out what they got. So much space from his ball screens. They had no clue how to defend it. And so, you look at what he does. Well, let's answer your question, because I know we're going to go into other things. Playing with Pete Nance, I said this, and we're doing a Pete Nance video also, but I made the statement last spring, summer, as we're going through the transfer portal, and you also, you had the power forward from Baylor, and that's who a lot of people wanted. And I told you that if Pete Nance comes out, that's who I want at North Carolina. Because I think he is the perfect, to me, complement to Armando Bacot. Because you said this too. you said, I don't know if I want a guy who can stretch the floor to 4, play the power forward as much as I want a guy who can help Armando guard the low post. Well, what you got in Pete Nance is both. So I think he's a godsend for Armando Bacot. He can guard the 5. You can give Armando a rest. And I think sometimes, and I've said this before, I think this is where some of these other guys get time at the 4, is when he can go down and play the 5. So I think that's something to watch for. Great passer of the basketball. He is very, very skilled. I'll get into numbers here in a little bit, kind of how I think that plays. But in touching this one, he's so skilled with the ball, able to handle it, able to pass it, able to shoot it. He's going to give Armando a lot of freedom, a lot of space to play, and he's going to be able to get the ball to him in space. So I just think in being able to do that and being able to defend the post, being a very intelligent basketball player, having a very high basketball IQ, I think he is the perfect complement. He's not going to be exactly like Brady Manning. And like I said, this is something else we'll touch on here in a second. But I think he's the perfect complement of what you want Armando Bacot to have this year.
Let's look ahead to late January, early February, when they're really beginning to take final form. Imagine Armando with his game stretched out. And we were told last year it was stretching out. It did a little bit, but I really believe it is now some, in part because they can afford to pull him away some, because they have the Nance factor out there. But they have a situation where they have a guy that can play the 4 out, 1 in. Nance can play out on the perimeter, or the 2 of them can play the high-low. And the guy he's playing the high-low with is 6'11", with tremendous hands and skills around the basket. And they can reverse it. It's not, sometimes you have a high-low, big situation where one guy is really a lot better just being the high. One guy's much better off being the low. They can reverse back and forth because of their skill level. And Nance gives them that ability. And they could go from a high-low set out to Nance spreading out to the wing, popping out there for a possible 3. And Armando's in a one-on-one situation down low with no help side defense nearby. I think Hubert's going to have a lot of fun with his old NBA days, trying to figure out isolations, trying to figure out 2-man stuff to get these guys to have very favorable matchups, either together or playing off one another, where one of them gets an ISO with one dude on them.
Yeah, and that's why I really like him down the block. And here's the thing: if this team's clicking, then you can't double, and it's hard to double in a high-low anyway. And they got so many effective entries out of the high-low where they're post passing. They're throwing the diagonal from the high post, where they've got the guy sealed on their hip inside, and they throw the bounce pass or the lob to the outside and go over the outside shoulder. They've got so much of that, and they got different looks to get into it. And they got counters. So, and that's always, and Hubert Davis has kept, that's something that he plays differently, but he's kept a lot of Roy's stuff. So he's always got that in his back pocket. So you can
see that this year, and we'll see that this year.
Yeah. So I think so. And it's going to be interesting to see, how much he has improved, out on the floor. And well, I guess we might as well get to it now, because we the elephant in the room is his maturation in the NBA skills. The NBA game, the college game, two totally different games. NBA is more in space, where college games you see a lot of that, but they don't run offenses like North Carolina runs, or like Kentucky runs, or like Kansas runs in the NBA. It's different. You don't see high-lows in the NBAs. You don't see flex in the NBA. You don't see this stuff. So the thing with him, number one, he's tailor-made to be a dominant college basketball player. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a dominant pro player. But here's what I like about him. We talked about Shibwe. You take the difference. You're looking at Bacot at 6'11", Shibwe 6'8". So that automatically makes Bacot more of a to me, an NBA candidate.
Shibwe's only 6'8"?
He's 6'8". So that's a difference
He plays bigger than 6'8".
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's so strong. But on Bacot, so you've got that. Bacot's got good feet at 6'11". One thing I noticed, a lot of his moves in the high post, when he gets it up there, we'll see how far he can stretch the jumper. I'm pretty comfortable with him shooting that 15, 16-foot jumper. But, man, he's really good at putting a ball on the floor and then going one way and spinning the other one, having that little finger roll, little English on it, spin on the shot as he finishes at the rim. He's really good at that. So he's got very clever feet. He's got good hands, good soft hands. That doesn't – so like I said, we want to see how far he can stretch the shot out. So what kind of spot would he go to in the NBA? They don't post up anymore. So you're not looking at a guy, they're going to play 4 out, look to drive, they can't get him. He's posting up ball side post. That's Dwight Howard. There's no place for a guy like that in the NBA now. But I can see him playing in that dunker spot, playing opposite short corner, opposite block, where you get to drive that he can catch and he can finish there. He can score off the offensive rebound.
I was going to say he'd clean up the glass from there.
Yes. So, there's ways for guys like that to play in the NBA. Now, one thing I've noticed on watching some practice tape and some of the stuff that gets out, I think Seth Greenberg put some stuff out where he went to a practice and had some clips. And the thing that leapt off the page at me, because he was talking about defensive principles, the thing that leapt off to the page to me, there was no soft drop coverage against ball screens or a hedge and recover. They were switching. Armando was switching. So
he dropped a lot last year.
Yeah, and the year before. So the thing that we're going to see, if they switch, that's going to be a lot of tape for NBA scouts to digest, where they can look at it and say, okay, here's what we want to know. Can Armando in the NBA, because it's all about matchups, and they switch everything. It drives me crazy in the NBA when you watch a game, they're just an automatic switch. They don't even have to try to come off the ball screen hard. They'll set a ball screen and the guy will take one dribble standing still and they switch automatically. So and so that's why you look at it, and I've heard old timers say, Charles Barkley and guys like that, they'll say, well, no wonder so-and-so scoring 35 a night. He's got a 7-footer guarding him. He's a great guard, and they just volunteer themselves into these. So the thing's going to be in the NBA, can he keep a perimeter in front of him? I think that's the biggest question about Armando Bacot when you go into draft status, is how well is he going to be able to guard the perimeter. So it looks to me like early on, Hubert Davis is going to give him the opportunity to do that, because it looks to me like they're going to do more switching this year, big on little, and ball screen to handle situations. At least in ball screen, they've done in the past.
Yeah. Well, Hubert swears he can guard 1 through 5. And I think one reason they might do more of that, nobody confused Dawson Garcia or Brady Manick last year with being a great defender, either one of them. And I wonder how much of that was because he didn't perceive that they were super strong defending at the 4. But he said about Pete Nance, when I asked him about Pete a couple weeks ago in Charlotte, he said the same thing about him he did about Armando. He can guard 1 through 5. And he said he should be in the NBA right now. And he's a great athlete. And a lot of things that kind of lend itself to utilizing the switch. Sometimes you would switch certain guys, but not switch everybody. And they did that at times last year. They didn't always switch everybody, but maybe now switching more is also Hubert's way of saying, okay, you're an NBA player. You have to be able to handle these switches, both of them.
You got more in the NBA in the NBA. You got more in North Carolina last year as the season went, where you saw them switch 1 through 4. And they might switch. They might switch to 1-4 ball screen, which what I'm talking about would be the power forward setting the ball screen, and that might be Manick, and they might switch that. Or if somebody else is playing that power forward spot, but they didn't switch to 1-5. So I'm talking about 1 being point guard, 5 being the center. Bacot's guarding the center. So if that came out, they didn't switch it. So they were switching everything but the 1-5 ball screen. So it looks to me like, that's off the table too now. So
yeah, and I wonder if part of that was also you don't want Armando picking up a cheap foul trying to guard a guard driving on him or something like that, because they couldn't afford to lose him. Now with Nance, they have a little bit more leverage there that maybe they can go ahead and get out there and have switching 1 through 5. We get. By the time this runs, we may have already seen the exhibition game, but I'm looking forward to the exhibition game just to see how they handle stuff like that. Seeing how the guys play, that's great. I want to see some of the defensive principles, because my understanding is they've spent a lot of time on defense in the early part of the last month when practice started. So it'll be interesting to see what is different about how they defend certain things.
Yeah, and that's one thing I like. They got some of these games there. They're not opening up with Gonzaga. You've got exhibition games, and it's funny. I watch some, whoever talking about the NFL, and they'll be talking about all the mistakes that are still made, and Aaron Rodgers can't get on par, and locked in to his new receivers and all that. And they'll say, well, there's, they basically still playing preseason. And, because none of those guys were playing in preseason games in the NFL, they were holding out all their starters. And then season comes, and it takes them 2 months to get in a rhythm. So, you've got exhibitions. I would think in this, and it'd be interesting too. I'm curious to see how much they play, because not only are you in your situation where you want your younger guys, you want DeMarco Dunn to get in the game. You want Seth Trimble to get in the game. I mean, you want Tyler Nickel to get in the game. You want Dontre Styles to get it. But you want these guys, and we talked about there may be the opportunity this year, if this is a better team, where you've got the bigger leads and you can build that bench a little bit. But with the bigs, I think you want Nance and Bacot to kind of play together some and get to know each other.
No, that's what Hubert said a couple of weeks ago. That's why he had them together in live action.
So I think you've got Hubert Davis getting with Jeff Lebo and Brad Frederick and Sean May saying, look, guys, how are we going to do this rotation? How are we going to do those minutes? Because we want these other guys to play, but we want them, and we don't want to wear them out. We don't want them. If you can, you don't want that Iron 5 playing 38 minutes a game and get more out. You'd like to get them down to 30, 32, maybe less than that. I don't know. But I think early in the season, you've got to have Bacot and Nance, getting as much time as possible together.
They got to get used to one another, no doubt about it. Hey, if you guys are not a member of Tar Heel Illustrated, cruise on over to our site, tarheelillustrated.com, for just $8.33 a month. That's it. You can be a Carolina insider too. So much stuff on our site is premium content. All of our recruiting content is premium, and you got to be a member. And a lot of it's just on the message boards. It's not stuff that you see on the front page. And we only hit on a small amount of stuff here on these podcasts. It's just a very small part of what we do. So much more of it is the written side. A lot of it's behind a paywall over on our site. It's just $8.33 a month. That also helps us keep cruising up along with this content, keeps us putting this stuff away. Because remember, we go where the Tar Heels go. We travel everywhere they go in football and basketball. We're out at a lot of recruiting events as well. Make sure you also come back and check out our other podcast previewing the basketball season. We've got a few of them already on tarheelillustrated.com and our channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, on YouTube. And we got more coming as we gear towards the opener November 7th against UNC Wilmington. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. We appreciate you stopping by.